Hello and welcome, my name is Tobal, and this is a new tutorial video series for Kenshi. On the next couple of videos, I'm going to be talking about specific topics within the game. So if you're looking for something in particular, take a look at the playlist here on the right side of the screen, and feel free to bounce ahead if you're already comfortable with creating a new character and learning the basics of the game. Otherwise, I'm going to be just jumping right in here and taking you through the character creation process. So let's click on New Game. And this is basically, of course, how you start out in Kenshi. You get to choose your start. Much like if you've ever played Skyrim and they have the Choose Another Life mod, it lets you pick kind of what your situation is. So sometimes you start in a different location with different items, different amounts of money, and things like that. So I'm going to cover a couple of these different starts and what to do about some of your character options and some of the advanced settings in the game. Okay, so the default start, and when you see difficulty it says default, this is what all other difficulties are based off of. So if we go to this one, for example, this is easy compared to the Wanderer start, or with the Holy Sword is harder than the Wanderer start. So this is kind of our baseline, and I feel like a lot of people who start the game are either going to start with this, or one of my favorites, Guy with a Dog, but we'll come back to that. So in the Wanderer start, you begin the game with 1,000 cats. By the way, the credit or the currency of the game is called a cat, and it's abbreviated by a C. The playstyle kind of gives you a hint as to how this game might be played out and how you might think of it in your head. So this is actually more of an RPG because you're playing one character, you're leveling his stats up, you're getting gear, his or her stats, you're getting gear, and you're progressing on through the game. However, at any point, you have the ability to recruit other wanderers basically to join your faction, and we'll cover that of course as well in a different video where we build up our little faction. So what do we look at the wanderer? It doesn't tell you exactly what's in your inventory, but it does give you a basic description. So here it says that you're just a lone wanderer with nothing but a few coins, a pair of pants, and a rusty sword, ready to venture out into the world. This start basically puts you in a neutral city with very little gear and of course very little money. And it is in a nice position, and I'm not going to spoil it too much about locations. I really want you to explore the Kenshi world on your own to find out, all these different locations that are out there. But it is in a decent spot where you can get to the other areas. Let's take a look at some of these other starts. The Wandering Trader is a trader-focused start of the game. You begin with a bit of trade goods, actually a backpack full of trade goods, and a pack animal. A pack animal is interesting because you can, in Kenshi, visit a local farm and buy animals from them, much like you could, I guess, visit a camel dealer perhaps if you were in the Middle East and get a camel to carry your goods for you. So you start with a pack animal, you start with the backpack full of goods. Now you don't start with any cash, however, the backpack full of trade goods and the pack animal are probably worth a couple of tens of thousands of cats. So it's a decent start, especially if you don't want to bother with the initially grinding portion of the game where you're trying to scrape together enough money just to survive. This is if you're really interested in kind of building up your income or building up your capital to start your faction. This would be a really fun start if you're just interested in trading only. This is considered easy compared to the Wanderer start. A couple of the other starts in the game affect your faction standings. So for example, the Holy Sword, the Hive Exile, and Son of a Captain are just some of the few starts that do change your beginning standings with a faction. So for example here, as Son of a Captain, which is a normal difficulty, so kind of an average start, you are allied with the United Cities. However, the Holy Empire hates your guts because you were basically in the army. If we go back to the Holy Sword, you actually start with a very unique legendary weapon. However, you seem to have possibly stolen that weapon from the Holy Nation, so they're not too happy with you. You actually start as a wanted criminal. Now, you can just choose to avoid that faction's lands, or you could try to work on kind of repairing your faction standing with them. So it's not like this is a forever you're going to be damned by that faction, but it is kind of a challenging start. The Cannibal Hunters is more of a scenario. You actually get put into a situation, and it's kind of, can you survive and get out of that situation? So it's pretty fun. I would definitely try it out at least some point just to see what it's like and be terrified of giant cannibal bands. So those are the basics. You can kind of read into some of these other ones. The slaves, you basically start as a slave, and Kenshi has a very unique system where you can enslave and be enslaved by other characters and NPCs. And there's a setting that makes your character basically be an obedient slave. He'll do whatever, or she'll do whatever they're told, which is kind of entertaining. Rock bottom, pretty rough. You're alone, unarmed, naked, hungry, and you're missing an arm. Have fun. Empire Citizen and Holy Nation Citizen are just 2 starts that put you in those particular factions' main cities or nearby. Guy with a Dog is fun because you do start as a random character with not much with them except for a little puppy, which is in the form of a bone dog, which is kind of fun. The last 2 starts that I want to talk about are the Nobodies and the Freedom Seekers. Both of these starts begin the game with other characters, so you actually get a group of 5 other NPCs that then join your party and then can be controlled by you. So you have a total of 6 characters to start with. The Freedom Seekers start with 4,000 cats and a good supply of building materials. So you can immediately go out and start building your base. However, I will warn you that is a bit challenging and a bit dangerous. I'm not going to go into the spoiler part of it. I might cover that with a little bit of a caveat of a spoiler in another video that's dedicated to base building and what happens after you build your base. But just be aware that there are some challenges that come up as soon as you start building your base that you might not be prepared for as soon as you start the game. The Nobodies are basically a group of 5 people, not including you, so 6 total, with nothing, but they're already there in your squad. So it's kind of an easy start if you don't want to deal with recruiting that many people. And if we take the base cost of a random NPC, that's about 15,000 cats worth of money that you get to save by just starting with Nobodies. Okay, so we've covered kind of where these beginnings start the game at. I'd like to cover what the next steps are, and I'm going to go over to Guy with a Dog, just as an example. I'm also going to crack open the advanced options here, and we're going to cover a couple of these. So hunger time, you do get hungry in the game and require food. Hunger time setting here changes how fast or how slow you get hungry. As you increase this number, it takes longer for you to get hungry. I personally always wind up increasing this number because I think I don't like to deal with the hunger all that often, but I don't like to bring it all the way out because it feels a little bit too much like cheating. So I normally bring it around 2 or 3 just to give it a little bit of an extended period on eating. Chance of death is kind of an outright chance that your character might die from combat, like wound degeneration or blood loss. So there's kind of some thresholds and some calculations in the game where if your character is bleeding out, you're going to die after a certain point. So if you have this very, very high up, your character might die at a much quicker rate or at a quicker point than it would have, or they would have if it was lower down. I normally keep this right at 1. Global damage multiplier is a setting that takes your base damage. So say you do 20 damage with your sword, it'll multiply that damage by the multiplier. So if you want to have faster battles, which means, you're basically doing more damage per hit, you could bump this setting up. If you want to have slower battles, you can bring that number down, and it basically might halve your damage of your weapon. Again, it doesn't affect the quality of your NPCs or your characters, it just affects the speed of the battles. Production, research, and building speeds. These are all part of your base building settings. I find these pretty average. I normally don't change too many. I might bump up something like production speed sometimes just because I don't like to wait forever to have some of the things get produced. Research speed is okay because really when you're researching, you can leave one person researching and take your main group somewhere else to do other things. So I find that I always am able to keep myself busy while people are researching. There's always something to do. Okay, number of nests. This is actually a setting for any random spawn in the game, not including only animals, but also including random NPCs that could be bandits that might fight you. So I personally like to bump this up to make the game just a bit more challenging and dangerous. This will increase the amount of, or the likeliness that these types of camps will appear in the wilds. So I wouldn't bump it up crazy high just because it might negatively affect your performance if your computer's not super high speed. If it's just a normal computer and not like a power gaming rig, I would go ahead and keep it maybe around 1 or 2 just so that you don't have to stress it out, because Kenshi as it is not always optimized in the best way, so it might struggle with higher settings and more NPCs to keep track of. Okay, finally we're going to look at Bandits Loot the Player. This setting is an option where bandits will actually knock you out and take some of your things, depending on who they are and maybe what they need. So, for example, someone starving, like a starving bandit, might knock you out and take your food, but another bandit might be interested in your pants or your sword or something like that. Easy prospecting, really just realize that there is a prospecting skill in the game. Normally it's tied to the science skill, I believe. I'm not 100% sure if it's science or a different skill. However, it is tied to a skill. If you don't want that to be tied to a skill and you want everyone to be the best prospector possible, you can check this box. This winds up showing you more, kind of a bigger, like if you picture doing an overhead scan of an area, and the more skill you have, the more of an area you can see zoomed out. So easy prospecting is okay if you want to choose that. Otherwise, I normally just keep it off because I like to dedicate someone to prospecting. And I think it's tied into science, so you don't have to make someone go around prospecting. They can get good at something else and just be a good prospector. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the character creation part of the starting the game. So we're going to look at the different types of races. Not super in-depth. There will be a video later on that covers some of those other races and what their bonuses are, and maybe how to find the best character for your base or maybe your little group. But roughly, I want to cover a couple different things. The first is that there are races and then there's sub-races, okay? So it's almost like, someone who's born, who might be European but might come from Western Europe or Eastern Europe, roughly. Here we've got a human race, but we've got the Greenlander and Scorchlander sub-races. You also can then have male and female of each sub-race or race. You can see down here under race stats that there is a flat percentage bonus to certain stats and certain skills. So certain races are better at certain things. Again, we'll cover all this in detail in another video, but I just want to make you aware of that when you're starting out. I normally pick a Greenlander. I don't find that I'm too held back by these stat points or these restrictions. If you want, I would suggest, though, if you're looking for a full combat start and you really want your character just to do nothing but smashing faces and you want them to be the toughest in the world, the Shek are not a bad race to start with. They have really good hit points. They have bonuses to toughness, attack, and strength. They tend to wield very large, heavy, over wieldy or over your head type sized weapons. So it's not a bad thing to start with. However, don't be restricted. If you feel like you like the skeleton race, if you like the hive race, or back to humans, you can play any of those. I will warn you, some factions are a bit sexist and a bit racist. So if you have a female character, you might notice in certain factions you get more negative attention than you would elsewhere. The same thing goes for skeletons and hive characters. I believe Shek as well to a certain extent. So just keep in mind that in the game, much like real life, there is some sexism and racism in the world, so you might experience some difficulties. I don't want to spoil too much, but if you do start as a skeleton, just be on your toes if you enter certain factions' lands. Not everyone appreciates a robot wandering around their area. So that's the rough part of the stats. I mean, here this is a traditional slider system for setting up your character's body, and you can change things like the height, the frame. You can go a little bit crazy with this. I love the posture option. You can definitely change these around and make them kind of like go completely crazy if you want. There's also an idle stance, so your character will kind of go in this position whenever they're not moving around. There's one that's like squatting. We can kind of make him look like Schmeagol, I'm sure. But, feel free to mess around with these, and you can have you can make as ugly and horrifying or as beautiful as a creature as you desire. So have fun with the slider system. It's pretty basic, but you can find some pretty interesting and unique combinations. There's a separate slider system for body, face, and the hair. So you can in fact change the hair and the color and things like that. I don't know why you can have neon green hair in the desert, but that's fine. You also have the option to randomize all the stats, or maybe just the body, or randomize just the face stats here. Also, when you're done, if you really like your character, I would name them something custom and then export them. By exporting your character, if we start the game again and you would like to bring that character in without any difficulties, you can go to the import list and then import that character. I think we named them Beauty. So if you notice here, let's click, remember how he looks, right? Little spiky hair in the beard. We're going to randomize a bunch of things. We can import Beauty, and it'll go right back to what he exported as. So I like this because sometimes if you start over a couple times and you wind up having a certain character style that you like, you can just import them easily into the game. The game does in fact start with, I did not make that, true story, it does come with the game, but the game does start with some imports that you can already bring. So I made Tobal a Tobal import here, and you can also bring other characters as well that the game already includes. Alright, the only other thing I want to cover is the fact that if you start the game with more than one character, you'll have a change character option here. Don't forget this. This is pretty important, especially if you want to customize the starting groups. So change character will let you see your other companion. So remember, we started with a guy and his dog. So we start with the bone dog. You could rename it to whatever you want. We're going to name it Odin after my own sweet boy. And that's that. Now, if you have another player, another character that's, you know, not an animal, you'll get to do the full customization again. So you could do that for every character if you want. Give them a custom name. Rename this guy back to Tobal. And that's that. So that's the end of character creation. I hope that explained a couple different things. And I do encourage you to try out some of the different starts. You'll find your own balance as you go, and you'll kind of find out what you enjoy. Again, not any real start makes you all that limited. I would say maybe except for Cannibal. That's kind of a dangerous start, and it's more of a scenario again. But you can still accomplish pretty much anything you want to do. I like Wanderer because to me it feels like a true natural start to the game, or, you know, starting with the dog. But if you don't feel like spending a bunch of time, because really at the start of the game you do grind away a little bit just trying to survive and build up your money. So if you want to skip a little bit of that, but still have a good sized challenge ahead of you, feel free to grab something like the Seekers, the Freedom Seekers, or whatever the other group of 5, the Nobodies, I think. That'll start you out with some different people. So I do hope that was informative. I hope it was useful for you. If you have any further questions, please go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you continue with this tutorial series, and let me know again if you'd like to see any other topic. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching.